the Curious Owl here, and today I have a review for The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey, the first book in the Fifth Wave series, trilogy actually now that I think about it. And this was my random TBR pick for the month, and coincidentally ended up actually working out really well for the Cramathon that I decided to sporadically do in the middle of June. Probably not the best idea, but I still did fairly well, and this was for the category for a book that is outside of my comfort zone because this deals with alien invasions, which I don't really have much experience with. I may have read a couple of books in the recent past that have been about alien invasions, but not to the extent of the Fifth Wave. And so I was really nervous going into it because I didn't know if it was going to be any good. I had heard some mixed reviews going further into the series, and to be completely honest, this underwhelmed me by a lot. I was not really impressed with it that much. I was impressed with it enough to where I want to continue with at least the Infinite Sea, but I don't know if it's really worth it. And so without further ado, let me get into my overall thoughts. So the main plot of this story is that there's an alien invasion going on Earth that basically starts to wipe out nearly all of the human life that is on Earth. There are several waves of this invasion that comes in that starts to wipe out more and more people as the waves progress. And the main perspective of this deals with a girl named Cassie, who is about 16, 17 years old, and has not only lost people she cares about, and is separated from her younger brother, who is taken by some people to supposedly take care of him, and hopefully they are going to try to keep him safe from possible other waves that are happening. There's also another perspective that is involved with this, with a guy named Ben, who actually went to school with Cassie, and a guy that Cassie had this big crush on, and he is essentially taken to the same place that her younger brother goes to in order to become a soldier in this place called Camp Haven, where they are basically training people to become soldiers in order to fight back against the aliens. Or so it seems. This is a book that definitely is, everything is not what it seems, and everything is topsy-turvy, and things are totally not all they appear to be. So overall, I really did like a lot of the plot elements that were within the story. I really enjoyed a lot of the kinds of things that were going on in terms of why the aliens were there, and a lot of the reasoning as to what was going on with the human race and what they were deciding to do. But there was so much going on that the second half of the story really started to get bogged down by a lot of the politics that were involved with it, especially in regards to the reasoning that the alien race is there. I honestly think that it would have been better if this was just stuck to Cassie and Ben's perspective. Now, the main plot is between Cassie and Ben, but there are multiple perspectives that play into the story many times, as this book is divided into several different parts that all deal with different perspectives. There are some with Cassie, some with Ben. One part in particular is dedicated to the perspective of Cassie's younger brother, which I think would be an exception to possibly making it a three-perspective book. But then there are other perspectives that don't seem to be really necessary, and I think it really kind of bogged down the story a lot with a lot of unnecessary information and just things that didn't seem to really need to be discussed, or could have been discussed in a way through the other perspectives that I think would have still been really eloquent and still really well done. There also, I have to say, I'm not going to say between who it is in case there's people out there who have not read this book or watched the movie. I don't even want to watch the movie, honestly, because I'm not interested enough in it. There is an insta-love relationship in this story, and I don't buy it whatsoever. It is too sudden. It is too fast-paced, honestly, for a beginning of a relationship. The characters do realize the relationship is moving very quickly, and I do appreciate that there is an awareness about it, but it still moves too fast for my comfort, especially since the guy that is involved with this is very shady from the very beginning of this relationship, and I just don't really care for him much. He redeems himself in the end, I think, but just no. Insta-love does not work in this kind of a story, especially with the kind of guy that this person ends up becoming. And the whole thing is that the girl that is involved in this relationship knows she can't trust him, and yet she is still with him and still decides it's okay for her to go on adventures with him and go to try to do other things with him while he is around, and it just doesn't make sense to me. If you don't trust the person, why would you be with them in the first place? You can tell that I got a little heated about this throughout the book, so I'm sorry, and I will dial it back a little bit. The ending also was very abrupt, and it was very much a kind of drift off into the sunrise kind of moment. Would like for there to have been something a little bit more interesting involved with it, because it definitely was just a ride off into the sunrise, sunset kind of moment, and I just wanted there to be a little bit more of a clear direction as to what is to be expected with the Infinite Sea, because there's pretty much nothing that is leading us to what could possibly happen in the next book. The other thing that really did not sit well with me was this whole world building thing. There is this idea that for the majority of the story, we are somewhere in Ohio, somewhere in a kind of more rural area, I think. There is mention that they're somewhere near Cincinnati possibly, but there's no clear idea as to where the majority of the story is taking place, and I wish that would have been a little bit clearer. But for the most part, there's not many details about how the world works because pretty much everyone's been wiped out. There is points that the wildlife is still okay. The wildlife has not really been affected that much by this entire alien invasion. It's only the humans that are being affected really in the whole scheme of things. But other than that, there's not really any details about how the world looks after this alien invasion. There's no talk of like how the landscape looks, if it's barren, if it's, desolate, if it's been all burned down. There's not really any clear idea as to how the landscape looks. I would think that in a post-apocalyptic or post-invasion story that would be a huge aspect of the story, especially since pretty much half the world plus has been wiped out completely, and I would think that there would be still a lot of things that were burned down. Like there's talk of businesses and buildings that are on fire or abandoned or broken into, and that's great and all, but what about the landscape? What about forests? And what about, more rural areas? How do they look? How do those compare to how the cities look? Do they seem still lush, or are they just as desolate as the cities? I will say the thing that this book did have going for it was I did really enjoy a lot of the characters. I really enjoyed looking through Cassie's perspective and Ben's perspective because they're two opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of this entire story, and I think that it gives a really good idea as to a whole well-rounded idea of how this whole thing is happening and what's all kind of going on. Then you also have some more insider looks when it comes to the little brother named Sam, who is not exactly a huge perspective. There's only one part in the entire story that is dedicated to his perspective, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from him as opposed to all of the other perspectives that were involved with the story, as I said earlier. But I did enjoy a lot of the characters. I really did enjoy the male that was involved in the instant love relationship, despite the fact that I thought he was incredibly shady, and he did redeem himself in the end, but I don't like the fact that he had an instant love relationship with one character. It just didn't make sense to me. But there you guys go. Those are all of my thoughts overall for The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. Basically, I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. It was very underwhelming for me. I think that it was really it just wasn't what I was expecting, and I expected a lot more from it because I had heard some really good reviews of it, but I do remember now that there were some really poor reviews of it, and I can definitely see why, because it just was really underwhelming for what I think I was expecting from it. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this review of The Fifth Wave. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit the button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!